The morning sun cast long shadows across the broken towers of Karaleth City. Commander Thane stood on the highest platform, his thick gray fur moving in the cold wind. Below him, his world was dying. Once this city housed 10 million Vorthak. Now barely 200 warriors remained. The great buildings that once reached toward the clouds stood empty and dark. Windows were shattered. Streets were filled with dust and silence. Thane was 8 feet tall and built like the ancient wolves his people descended from. His golden eyes could see for miles across the wasteland that was once a thriving world. His powerful hands gripped the metal railing as he watched smoke rise from the medical center below. Another funeral pyre. Another warrior gone to the gray rot. "Commander!" a voice called behind him. Thane turned to see Marcus, his second in command. Marcus was younger but already showed the signs. His once bright fur had turned dull. His eyes were sunken. His massive frame looked smaller each day. "How many today?" Thane asked. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. 7, Marcus replied, "including 2 cubs." Thane closed his eyes. Cubs were the future of their race. Every cub that died meant their species moved one step closer to extinction. In the old days, before the gray rot, cubs were rare and precious. Now they were dying faster than they could be born. "The food stores?" Thane asked. 3 days left. Maybe 4 if we cut portions again. Thane nodded. They had already cut portions, 5 times. The warriors were eating barely enough to stay alive, but it didn't matter. The gray rot made it impossible for their bodies to use the food anyway. They could eat a full meal and still waste away to nothing. The gray rot had appeared 2 years ago. At first, only a few Vorthak got sick. Their stomachs would hurt. They would lose weight. The doctors said it was a simple illness that would pass, but it didn't pass. It spread. Within 6 months, half the population was sick. Within a year, most were dead. The ones who survived found they could no longer digest their traditional foods. The protein-rich meats that had fed Vorthak for thousands of years now made them violently ill. Their best scientists worked day and night to find a cure. They built new machines, created new medicines, and tested hundreds of treatments. Nothing worked. The gray rot destroyed something deep in their digestive systems, something that couldn't be fixed. Other worlds had tried to help. The Zentari offered their finest doctors. The Kuloth shared their advanced medical technology. The Matai provided experimental drugs. Nothing worked on Vorthak biology. One by one, the other species stopped coming. They gave up on the dying world and its proud people. Thane walked down the spiraling ramp that connected the tower to the main city. His heavy footsteps echoed in the empty corridors. Once, these halls had been filled with the sounds of cubs playing and warriors training. Now they were tombs. He passed the Hall of Honor, where statues of great Vorthak heroes stood in silent rows. General Knox, who had united the 5 great packs 3 centuries ago. Admiral Price, who had led the first expedition to the stars. Explorer Davis, who had discovered 12 new worlds. All their achievements meant nothing now. Their proud civilization was ending not in glorious battle but in slow, painful starvation. Thane entered the medical center. The smell hit him immediately. It was the smell of sickness and death. Dr. Foster looked up from his work. Foster was old, even by Vorthak standards. His white fur was thin, and his once powerful frame was bent with age and worry. "Commander," Foster said, "I was hoping you wouldn't come today." "That bad?" Thane asked. Foster nodded toward the far corner of the room. There, on small beds, lay a dozen cubs. Their breathing was shallow. Their fur was dull and patchy. Some were so thin that their ribs showed through their skin. "We lost little Sam this morning," Foster said quietly. "And Kelly isn't expected to last the night." Thane felt something break inside his chest. Sam had been only 3 years old. Kelly was barely 2. They should have had long, full lives ahead of them. Instead, they were dying because their own bodies couldn't process food. "Anything new from the research teams?" Thane asked. Foster shook his head. "Dr. Webb thinks he's close to something, but he's been saying that for months. The truth is, Commander, we're out of options. Our digestive systems are too damaged. Even if we had unlimited food, we can't break down the complex proteins our bodies need. And the simpler foods? We've tried everything available on this world. Nothing works. Our systems need something so basic, so simple, that it doesn't exist in our technology or our environment." Thane looked at the dying cubs again. His own mate, Sarah, was pregnant with their first cub. The thought of bringing new life into this dying world filled him with despair. "How long do we have?" he asked. "At current rates? 2 months, maybe 3 if we're lucky." Thane nodded and left the medical center. He walked through the empty streets toward the communication center. Every day he sent out the same message to any ships that might be passing through their sector of space. It was a simple distress call, broadcast on all frequencies. Most species in the galaxy knew about the gray rot by now. They knew the Vorthak were dying. They also knew that nothing could be done to save them. But Thane kept broadcasting anyway. It was all he could do. The communications center was on the edge of the city. It was one of the few buildings still fully powered. Banks of equipment hummed quietly, sending their message into the dark void of space. "Any responses today, Rachel?" Thane asked the communications officer. Rachel looked up from her console. Like everyone else, she was thinner than she should. B. Her once glossy fur was dull and lifeless. "Nothing, sir." The usual automated responses from trading posts warning ships to avoid our system. One message from the Zentari embassy expressing their continued sympathy. Sympathy. Thane almost laughed. Sympathy wouldn't save his people. He walked to the main transmitter and looked at the small screen showing their message. It was simple and direct, translated into 40 different languages. "This is Karoleth Prime. Vorthak civilization requires immediate assistance. Population dying from unknown plague. All attempts at treatment have failed. Any ship capable of rendering aid, please respond." Thane had memorized every word. He had written it himself, swallowing his pride to beg for help from strangers. The mighty Vorthak, who had once conquered a dozen worlds, were now reduced to sending desperate pleas into empty space. "Keep broadcasting," he told Rachel. "Yes, sir." Thane left the communications center and walked back toward his personal quarters. The sun was setting, painting the broken city in shades of red and orange. It would have been beautiful if it weren't so sad. Tomorrow, more of his people would die. The day after that, more still. Within a few months, the Vorthak would be nothing but empty buildings and silent streets, unless something changed, unless someone, somewhere, heard their call for help. Dr. Rebecca Martinez floated in the observation deck of the human research vessel Meridian, watching stars drift past the large window. She was 34 years old, with short brown hair and curious green eyes. Her small frame made her look younger than she was, something that often worked against her in the male-dominated world of space exploration. Rebecca had spent the last 3 years studying alien plant life in the outer rim systems. It was lonely work, but she loved discovering new forms of life. Every planet held surprises, and every sample could lead to breakthroughs in medicine or agriculture. "Dr. Martinez to the bridge," came Captain Williams' voice over the ship's communication system. Rebecca pushed off from the window and floated through the corridor toward the bridge. The Meridian was a small research ship with a crew of only 12 people. Everyone knew everyone else, and privacy was rare. Captain Williams was a serious man in his 50s. His gray hair was cut short, and his uniform was always perfectly clean. He had been in space for 20 years and followed regulations exactly. "What can I do for you, Captain?" Rebecca asked as she entered the bridge. "We're picking up a distress signal," Williams said, pointing to the communications console. "It's coming from a system about 6 hours away. The signal is weak but consistent." Rebecca moved to the console where Jake Thompson, the ship's engineer, was adjusting the receivers. Jake was tall and friendly, with blonde hair and an easy smile. He had worked on dozens of ships and could fix almost anything. "Can you clean up the signal?" Rebecca asked. "Working on it," Jake replied. His fingers moved quickly over the controls. "There, listen to this." The message played through the speakers. It was translated into human English by the ship's computer. The voice was deep and rough, nothing like any species Rebecca had encountered before. "This is Karoleth Prime. Vorthak civilization requires immediate assistance. Population dying from unknown plague. All attempts at treatment have failed. Any ship capable of rendering aid, please respond." Rebecca felt her heart speed up. A dying civilization. An unknown species. This was exactly the kind of discovery that could change everything. "Captain, we have to investigate," she said. Williams shook his head. "Negative. We're a research vessel, not a rescue ship. Our mission is to collect plant samples from the Delta system." "But they're dying," Rebecca argued. "We might be the only ship in range, and we might be flying into a trap, or a plague zone, or a war. I won't risk my crew for unknowns." Rebecca felt frustration building in her chest. This was always the that problem with military captains. They saw danger in everything new. "Captain, I'm a xenobiologist. Studying unknown life forms is exactly what I'm trained for. And if there's a plague involved, maybe I can help." Lisa Park, the ship's security officer, spoke up from her station. "I agree with Dr. Martinez. We have a duty to respond to distress calls." Lisa was shorter than Rebecca, but much stronger. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her brown eyes were always alert. Williams looked around the bridge. Most of the crew was watching him, waiting for his decision. Finally, he sighed. 6 hours there, 6 hours back. We investigate only. If there's any sign of danger, we leave immediately. Understood?" "Understood," Rebecca said quickly, before he could change his mind. The Meridian changed course toward the unknown system. Rebecca spent the next 6 hours studying everything she could find about the signal. The language was new, but the translation computers were getting better at understanding it. The Vorthak seemed to be a warrior species. Their messages mentioned packs, commanders, and battles, but now they were dying from something they called the gray rot. When they arrived at the Karoleth system, Rebecca pressed her face to the observation window. The planet below was beautiful from space. Blue oceans, brown continents, white clouds. It looked like it could support life. But as they got closer, Rebecca could see something was wrong. The night side of the planet showed very few lights. For a civilization advanced enough for space travel, the planet should have been blazing with cities. "Take us down," Williams ordered. "But stay ready for immediate departure." The landing party consisted of Rebecca, Jake, Lisa, and 2 other crew members. They wore environmental suits and carried basic medical supplies. Rebecca also brought her portable laboratory equipment. The shuttle landed near what looked like a major city. As they stepped outside, Rebecca gasped. The buildings were huge, built for creatures much larger than humans, but many were damaged, or empty. "Look at the size of these structures," Jake said, his voice full of wonder. "Whatever lives here must be giants." They didn't have to wait long to find out. A group of figures approached from the city. Rebecca's first thought was that they looked like enormous wolves walking on 2 legs. They were at least 8 feet tall, covered in thick fur, with golden eyes and sharp teeth. The lead creature spoke in the same deep, rough voice they had heard. "In the distress signal. I am Commander Thane of the Vorthak. You responded to our call for aid." Rebecca stepped forward, her translation device working to convert her words. "I am Dr. Rebecca Martinez. We came as soon as we received your message. Thane looked down at the small human female. His expression was hard to read, but Rebecca thought she saw disappointment in his golden eyes. You are very small, Thane said finally. Size isn't everything, Rebecca replied. We're here to help. Other Vorthak had gathered around them. Rebecca could see they were all sick. Their fur was dull, their eyes were sunken, and they moved slowly. Some were so thin that their bones showed through their skin. What can creatures so small and weak possibly do for us? Asked another Vorthak. This one was smaller than Thane, but still much larger than any human. We have the finest doctors, the most advanced medicine. If we cannot save ourselves, how can you? Rebecca felt anger rising in her chest. She had traveled 6 hours to help, and they were insulting her before she even had a chance to examine them. Maybe because we're not too proud to try new approaches, she said. The Vorthak around them growled, a low sound that made Lisa's hand move to her weapon. You dare insult the Vorthak? Thane asked, his voice dangerous. I dare to offer help, Rebecca replied, not backing down despite the fact that Thane could probably tear her in half. But if you'd rather die than accept aid from someone smaller than you, that's your choice. Jake touched her arm gently. Rebecca, maybe we should be more diplomatic, but Rebecca was tired of diplomacy. She had seen dying civilizations before, usually because they were too stubborn to accept help from outsiders. Look around you, she said to Thane. Your city is empty. Your people are starving. Your children are dying. And you're worried about what species offers to help. Pride doesn't cure diseases. Thane stared down at her for a long moment. Rebecca could hear her own heartbeat in the silence. Finally, Thane spoke. You may examine our sick, but do not expect miracles from creatures so small. I don't believe in miracles, Rebecca said. I believe in science. As they walked toward the medical center, Rebecca noticed something else about the Vorthak. Despite their size and obvious strength, they moved carefully around the humans. They were trying not to accidentally hurt the small aliens. Maybe, Rebecca thought, there was hope for communication after all. But first, she had to figure out what was killing them. And she had a feeling that wouldn't be the easy part. Rebecca followed Commander Thane through the massive corridors of the Vorthak Medical Center. The ceiling was at least 15 feet high, and the doorways were wide enough for 3 humans to walk side by side. Everything was built for creatures, much larger than herself. Dr. Foster, the elderly Vorthak physician, met them at the entrance to the main treatment area. His white fur was thin and patchy, and his golden eyes were tired from months of watching his people die. Commander, I must warn you, Foster said to Thane. We lost 6 more during the night, including Marcus. Rebecca saw Thane's massive shoulders sag. Marcus had been his second in command, someone important to him. Show the human what she needs to see, Thane said quietly. Foster led Rebecca into a large room filled with beds. The sight made her stomach turn. Dozens of Vorthak lay dying, their once powerful bodies reduced to skin and bones. Some were so weak they could barely lift their heads. But it was the smaller beds in the corner that broke her heart. Cubs, some no bigger than human children, lay motionless. Their breathing was so shallow she had to look closely to see if they were still alive. How many? Rebecca asked. 200 adults, 37 cubs, Foster replied. Down from over 300 last month. Rebecca pulled out her medical scanner and approached one of the adult patients. The Vorthak looked at her with suspicious golden eyes but didn't resist as she ran the device over his body. The readings were shocking. The creature's digestive system was completely damaged. His stomach lining was destroyed, his intestines were inflamed, and his liver was barely functioning. Tell me about their diet, Rebecca said. Traditional Vorthak food is mostly meat, Foster explained. High protein, high fat. We are hunters by nature, but the gray rot makes it impossible to digest complex proteins. Everything we eat comes back up or passes through without providing nutrition. What have you tried for treatment? Foster walked to a wall covered with charts and data. Everything. Protein supplements, enzyme therapy, direct nutritional injection, artificial stomach linings. Nothing works. The damage is too extensive. Rebecca studied the medical data. It was clear that the Vorthak digestive systems had been destroyed by some kind of toxin or virus. But what caught her attention was something Foster hadn't mentioned. "What about simple carbohydrates?" she asked. Foster looked confused. "What are those?" "Basic sugars and starches. The simplest forms of food energy." "We have never eaten such things," Foster said. "Vorthak are meat eaters. Plant foods are for weak species." Rebecca felt excitement building in her chest. "Has anyone tested whether your damaged systems can still process simple carbohydrates?" "Why would we? Such foods are not part of our culture." Rebecca turned to Jake, who had been quietly examining Vorthak medical equipment. "Jake, do we have any basic food supplies on the ship?" "Sure," Jake said. "Standard rations, some emergency supplies." "Why?" "I need flour. White flour, if we have it. Also salt water and yeast." Jake looked puzzled. "Okay, but what are you planning?" "To do? Make bread." Foster made a sound that Rebecca realized was Vorthak laughter, but there was no humor in it. "Bread? You think bread will save a warrior species that your own doctors cannot help?" "Maybe," Rebecca said. "Simple carbohydrates are the easiest thing for a damaged digestive system to process. If your stomachs can handle anything, it would be basic bread." Thane had been listening silently. Now he spoke up. "This is foolishness. Vorthak do not eat plant foods." "Dying Vorthak might," Rebecca replied, "unless you prefer to maintain your cultural purity while your species goes extinct." The room went quiet. Rebecca realized she had probably gone too far, but she was tired of pride getting in the way of medical treatment. "I will return to our ship," she said. "Give me 2 hours." Back. On the Meridian, Rebecca hurried to the small galley where Danny Rodriguez prepared meals for the crew. Danny was a cheerful man in his 40s who took pride in making good food from basic ingredients. "Danny, I need your help," Rebecca said. "I need to make bread. Simple, basic bread." Danny looked surprised. "Sure, Doc. Any particular kind?" "The most basic possible. Something a damaged digestive system could handle." Danny nodded and began pulling ingredients from storage. "Plain white bread it is. Flour, water, salt, yeast. Nothing fancy." Rebecca watched as Danny mixed the ingredients in a large bowl. His hands worked the dough expertly, kneading it until it was smooth and elastic. "Why bread, Doc?" Danny asked as they waited for the dough to rise. "It's the simplest food I can think of," Rebecca explained. "Pure carbohydrates, easy to digest, gentle on damaged stomachs. If anything can provide nutrition to the Vorthak, it should be this." "Makes sense," Danny said. "My grandmother always gave us toast when we were sick. Said it was the only thing the stomach could handle." An hour later, the smell of fresh bread filled the galley. Danny pulled 4 golden loaves from the oven, their crusts perfectly browned. "Beautiful," he said with pride. Rebecca carried the warm loaves back to the Vorthak Medical Center. The smell drew curious looks from the alien doctors, but most seemed skeptical. "You really think this will help?" Foster asked. "Only one way to find out," Rebecca said. She approached one of the cubs who was barely conscious. The little Vorthak looked like a small wolf puppy, his fur dull and his breathing weak. "What is his name?" Rebecca asked. "Brian," Foster replied. "He is 3 years old. He will not last another day." Rebecca tore off a small piece of bread and soaked it in water until it was soft. Very gently, she placed it in Brian's mouth. "Swallow, little one," she whispered. The cub's throat moved slightly. The bread went down. Rebecca held her breath. In cases of severe digestive damage, even water could cause violent reactions. If the bread came back up, her theory was wrong. Minutes passed. The bread stayed down. "Give him a little more," Foster said, his voice full of hope for the first time in months. Rebecca fed Brian another small piece, then another. The cub's eyes began to focus. His breathing became stronger. "It is working," Foster whispered. Word spread quickly through the medical center. Vorthak doctors gathered around Brian's bed, watching in amazement as the dying cub showed the first signs of recovery in weeks. Thane arrived and stared down at the small human feeding bread to his people's young. "How?" he asked. "Simple chemistry," Rebecca explained. "Bread is mostly starch, which breaks down into glucose. Glucose is the most basic form of energy. Even severely damaged digestive systems can usually process it." "But we are carnivores," Thane said. "You're dying carnivores," Rebecca replied. "And dead carnivores don't eat anything." She looked around the room at the watching Vorthak. "I have enough bread for maybe a dozen patients. But if this works, I can teach you how to make more, much more." Foster nodded eagerly. "Show us everything." As Rebecca began distributing small pieces of bread to the sickest cubs, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The proud warrior species might have to swallow more than bread to survive. They might have to swallow their pride as well. But if it meant the difference between life and death, Rebecca thought they might just be hungry enough to try. 3 days had passed since Rebecca first fed bread to little Brian. The young Vorthak cub was sitting up in his bed, his golden eyes bright and alert. His fur had begun to regain some of its natural shine, and he was asking for more of the strange human food. But not everyone was convinced. "This is temporary," argued Dr. Stone, one of the senior Vorthak physicians. "A brief improvement before the final collapse. Vorthak cannot survive on plant foods." Rebecca stood in the medical center, surrounded by dozens of adult Vorthak who towered over her small frame. Some looked hopeful, others remained skeptical. All of them were still dying. "Brian has gained 2 pounds in 3 days, Rebecca said, pointing to the cub who was now playing with a simple toy. "His blood tests show improving liver function and reduced inflammation." "One cub does not prove anything," Stone replied. "We are warriors, not plant eaters. Our ancestors would be ashamed." Commander Thane had been watching silently from the corner. His own mate, Sarah, lay in one of the beds, heavy with their unborn cub. She had refused to try the bread, saying it was beneath the dignity of a warrior's mate. "Pride does not feed empty stomachs," Rebecca said, her voice rising. "And dignity does not save dying children." Before anyone could respond, a commotion broke out near the entrance. A young Vorthak female rushed in, carrying a small cub in her arms. The cub was unconscious, his breathing so shallow it was barely visible. "Please help," the female cried. "This is Kevin. He collapsed while playing. He will not wake up." Dr. Foster quickly examined the cub. His face was grim as he looked up. "Severe malnutrition. Complete system shutdown. I am sorry, but there is nothing we can do." Rebecca pushed forward. "Let me try." "No," Stone said firmly. "This cub is beyond help. Do not give false hope with your plant foods." Rebecca ignored him and knelt beside the small bed where Kevin lay. The cub was even smaller than Brian had been, probably no more than 2 years old. His fur was completely dull and his tiny chest barely moved. "Please," she whispered to the unconscious cub. "Just try to swallow." She took a piece of bread and soaked it in water until it was almost liquid. Very carefully, she placed a few drops on Kevin's tongue. Nothing happened. Rebecca tried again, gently massaging the cub's throat to encourage swallowing. Still nothing. "You see," Stone said, "your human food cannot perform miracles." Rebecca felt tears forming in her eyes. She had been so confident that bread could help all of them. But watching this small life slip away made her doubt everything. Then Kevin's throat moved, just slightly. The bread had gone down. Rebecca held her breath and gave him a little more. Then more. Slowly, drop by drop, she fed liquid bread to the dying cub. After 20 minutes, Kevin's breathing became stronger. After an hour, his eyes fluttered open. After 2 hours, he was sitting up and asking for his mother. The medical center fell completely silent. "How is this possible?" Stone whispered. "Simple nutrition," Rebecca replied. His body was shutting down from lack of energy. The bread provided immediate fuel that his damaged system could actually use. Commander Thane stepped forward. For the first time since Rebecca had met him, the massive warrior looked uncertain. "If this can save Kevin, can it save all of us?" "I believe so," Rebecca said. "But you have to be willing to try. All of you." She looked around the room at the watching Vorthak. "I know bread seems like weak food to you. I know it goes against everything you believe about what warriors should eat. But your choice is simple. Eat bread and live, or maintain your pride and die." Sarah, Thane's mate, spoke from her bed. "I will try the human food." Stone looked shocked. "Sarah, you are carrying the next generation. You cannot risk it." "I am carrying a cub that will die if I do," Sarah replied. "If there is any chance this can help, I must take it." Rebecca brought Sarah a small piece of bread. The pregnant Vorthak ate it slowly, her face showing distaste for the unfamiliar texture and taste. "It is strange," Sarah said, "but not unpleasant." Over. The next few hours, more Vorthak began to try the bread. Rebecca worked with Jake and Danny to produce more loaves using the ship's food fabricators. They made dozens of loaves, filling the medical center with the smell of fresh baking. Not everyone was willing to try. Some of the older warriors refused, saying they would rather die as true Vorthak than live as plant-eaters. But many others, especially those with young cubs, were willing to set aside their pride for survival. By evening, the change was remarkable. Cubs who had been near death were sitting up and playing. Adult Vorthak, who had been too weak to stand, were walking around the medical center. Rebecca found herself working 18 hours a day. She taught Vorthak doctors how to mix the dough, how to knead it properly, and how to bake it at the right temperature. She showed them how to make the bread softer for the sickest patients, and how to add simple nutrients to improve its value. Jake helped set up larger ovens using Vorthak technology. The aliens were amazed at how simple the process was, but they learned quickly. Soon, the smell of baking bread filled not just the medical center, but several buildings throughout the city. Captain Williams arrived from the ship, demanding to know why his crew was spending so much time on the planet. "We have our own mission to complete," Williams said. "We cannot stay here indefinitely playing baker." "These people are recovering," Rebecca replied. "In another week, they will be strong enough to produce their own food. All they need is time to learn." "And if something goes wrong, if this treatment fails?" Rebecca looked at little Brian, who was now running around the medical center with other cubs. She looked at Kevin, who had gone from near death to full health in just days. She looked at Sarah, who was glowing with new energy as her unborn cub grew stronger inside her. "Then at least we tried," she said. Williams studied the scene around him. Huge Vorthak warriors were carefully kneading bread dough under the guidance of tiny human Rebecca. Ancient enemies of plant food were learning to appreciate the simple taste of fresh bread. "1 week," Williams said finally. "Then we leave, whether they are ready or not." Rebecca nodded. 1 week would have to be enough. As night fell over Karoleth City, the lights stayed on longer than they had in months. The sound of voices filled the medical center as recovering Vorthak talked and laughed with their families. For the first time in 2 years, the city felt alive. 1 week later, Rebecca stood in what had once been an empty warehouse. Now it was filled with the sound of working hands and the smell of fresh bread. Dozens of Vorthak were kneading dough, tending ovens, and learning the ancient human art of baking. Commander Thane approached her, carrying a perfectly shaped loaf. His massive hands, once used only for weapons and warfare, now handled delicate dough with surprising gentleness. "Is this acceptable?" he asked, showing her the bread. Rebecca examined it carefully. The crust was golden brown, the shape was even, and when she tapped it, it made the right hollow sound. "Perfect," she said. "You are becoming quite the baker." Thane looked pleased, though he tried to hide it. "It is strange work for a warrior, but I find it satisfying to create something that gives life instead of taking it." Sarah walked over, moving easily despite being pregnant. The change in her was remarkable. 3 weeks ago, she had been too weak to sit up. Now she glowed with health and energy. "The cubs are asking for more sweet bread," she told Rebecca. "The kind you made with honey." Rebecca smiled. She had taught the Vorthak to add honey to some loaves, creating a treat that the cubs especially loved. It was amazing how quickly they had adapted to their new diet. "I will show the bakers how to make another batch," Rebecca said. As she walked through the warehouse, Rebecca marveled at the transformation. The Vorthak had not just learned to eat bread, they had embraced it completely. They experimented with different grains, added fruits and nuts, and created varieties she had never imagined. Dr. Foster approached with a data pad full of medical results. The elderly physician looked 20 years younger than he had a month ago. "The latest blood tests are remarkable," he said. "Liver function is normal in 90% of patients. Digestive inflammation has almost completely disappeared. We have not lost a single patient in 10 days. "What about the cubs?" Rebecca asked. "All surviving cubs are now at healthy weights. Even better, 3 new cubs have been born since we started the bread diet. All healthy." Rebecca felt tears of joy in her eyes. They had not just saved the Vorthak. They had given them a future. Jake. Thompson ran up to them, his face excited. "Rebecca, you need to see this. The Vorthak have improved our ovens. They are now twice as efficient and can bake 50 loaves at once." Rebecca followed Jake to see the new ovens. The Vorthak engineers had combined human baking techniques with their advanced technology. The results were impressive machines that could produce hundreds of loaves per day with minimal energy. "We are also working on grain cultivation," said Dr. Webb, the Vorthak agricultural specialist. "Your friend Danny has taught us about wheat, rice, and corn. We believe we can grow them in our soil." Rebecca found Danny in another section of the warehouse, surrounded by young Vorthak who were eagerly learning human recipes. The cook was in his element, teaching aliens how to make everything from simple bread to complex pastries. "These folks are amazing students," Danny told Rebecca. "They have better noses than humans. They can smell when bread is perfectly done from across the room." "The nose knows," laughed Kevin, the cub Rebecca had saved from near death. He was now a healthy, energetic child who followed Rebecca everywhere. His mother had named Rebecca, as his honorary aunt, a high honor in Vorthak culture. Captain Williams entered the warehouse, looking around in amazement. The transformation of the dying city had been visible even from orbit. Lights were on throughout Karoleth City, and the population had tripled as Vorthak from other settlements came seeking the miracle cure. "Dr. Martinez," Williams said, "I have received new orders from Earth Command. They want you to stay here and establish a permanent research station." Rebecca felt her heart skip. "Really? It seems your bread cure has applications beyond the Vorthak. Other species are sending representatives to learn about simple carbohydrate therapy. Earth wants to be at the center of this medical breakthrough." "Commander." Thane overheard the conversation. "You would stay on our world?" "If you would have me," Rebecca replied. Thane drew himself up to his full height and spoke in formal tones. "Dr. Rebecca Martinez, small in body but great in spirit, I offer you the highest honor of our people. Will you accept adoption into the Karoleth pack as my pack sister?" Rebecca felt overwhelmed. Pack adoption was sacred to the Vorthak. It meant she would be considered family, with all the rights and responsibilities that came with it. "I would be honored," she said. The entire warehouse erupted in cheers. Vorthak howled their approval while the human crew applauded. Even Captain Williams was smiling. The adoption ceremony took place that evening in the Great Hall of Caroleth City. Rebecca knelt before the assembled pack leaders while Thane recited ancient words that bound her to their people. When it was finished, she bore the traditional pack markings, painted on her forehead in blue and gold. "You came to us as a stranger," Thane said to the assembled crowd. "You found us dying and proud. You offered us life through the simplest of gifts. Bread. Food so basic that we had scorned it as unworthy. But in our darkest hour, simple bread became our salvation." He looked down at Rebecca with respect and affection. "From this day forward, Rebecca Martinez shall be known as Breadbringer, Pack Sister, Saver of Cubs. Her name will be remembered as long as Vorthak draw breath." Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face. She had come to study alien plants and ended up saving an entire civilization with something as simple as flour and water. Later that night, she stood on the balcony of her new quarters, looking out over Caroleth City. The lights stretched to the horizon, a sign of a people reborn. The smell of baking bread drifted on the evening air. Jake joined her on the balcony. "Any regrets about staying?" Rebecca thought about her old life, traveling from planet to planet in search of new discoveries. Then she thought about Brian and Kevin and all the other cubs who would grow up healthy because of bread. She thought about Thane and Sarah and the new generation of Vorthak who would never know the fear of starvation. "None," she said. "This is where I belong." In the distance, she could see Vorthak farmers working in the first wheat fields, growing grain under alien stars. Tomorrow, those fields would feed a civilization that had learned the value of simple things. Rebecca smiled. Sometimes the greatest discoveries came not from complex science but from basic human kindness and a willingness to share what you had, even if what you had was just bread. 6 months after first landing on Caroleth, Rebecca stood in the middle of a golden wheat field that stretched to the horizon. The alien sun warmed her face as she watched young Vorthak cubs running between the grain stalks, their laughter echoing across the farmland. The transformation was complete. Where once there had been empty, dying cities, now there were thriving communities. Where once there had been despair, now there was hope. And at the center of it all was bread. "Dr. Martinez," called a familiar voice. Rebecca turned to see Brian, approaching, now 6 months older and completely healthy. He carried a basket filled with fresh loaves, still warm from the ovens. "What do you think?" Brian asked, showing her a loaf he had made himself. "I added seeds like you taught me." Rebecca examined the bread carefully. It was perfectly formed, with a golden crust and interesting texture from the added seeds. "Excellent work," she said. "You are becoming quite the master baker." Brian beamed with pride. Like many of the cubs, he had become fascinated with bread making. The Vorthak children saw it not as a survival necessity, but as an art form to be mastered. Commander Thane approached from the edge of the field, accompanied by several other Vorthak leaders. His appearance had changed dramatically over the past months. Where once he had looked tired and defeated, now he stood tall and strong. His fur was thick and glossy, and his golden eyes sparkled with energy. "Pack Sister," Thane said, using Rebecca's formal title. "We have news from the other worlds." Rebecca walked with them toward the research station she had built at the edge of the wheat fields. It was a modest building, combining human technology with Vorthak construction techniques. Inside, the walls were covered with charts showing the spread of bread technology across the galaxy. Red pins marked worlds where species suffered from similar digestive problems. Green pins showed worlds where bread therapy had been successfully implemented. "The Zentari delegation has reported complete success," said Dr. Foster, who now served as Rebecca's research partner. "Their digestive plague was very similar to ours. Simple bread therapy has saved their entire population." Rebecca smiled. The Zentari had been the first species to contact them after word spread about the Vorthak recovery. Their planet had been suffering from a similar condition, and they were desperate for solutions. "What about the Mentai?" Rebecca asked. "Also successful," Foster replied, "though they required a different grain combination. Their systems respond better to rice-based bread." Jake Thompson entered the research station carrying a communication device. He had also chosen to stay on Karolith, finding the work more meaningful than his previous assignments. "Rebecca, you have an incoming message from Earth Command," Jake said. "Admiral Chen wants to speak with you personally." Rebecca activated the communication system. The image of Admiral Chen appeared on the screen, her gray hair pulled back in a military style. "Dr. Martinez," Chen said, "I am calling to inform you that the Galactic Medical Council has voted to establish the Rebecca Martinez Institute for Simple Nutrition Therapy. You will be the director, with funding from 12 different species." Rebecca felt overwhelmed. "I am honored, Admiral. But all I did was share bread." "All you did was save multiple civilizations with basic human ingenuity," Chen replied. "The Institute will research simple nutritional solutions for species across the galaxy. Your work has already prevented 3 extinctions." After the call ended, Rebecca walked outside and found Sarah sitting under a tree with her new cub. The baby Vorthak was healthy and strong, born into a world where starvation was no longer a threat. "He is beautiful," Rebecca said, looking at the small cub. "I have named him Baker," Sarah said, "in honor of the human who saved his life before he was even born." Rebecca felt tears in her eyes. The Vorthak were naming their children after bread and baking, concepts that had once been foreign to their culture. Danny Rodriguez approached, wiping flour from his hands. He had established a baking school that now taught both Vorthak and visiting aliens the art of bread making. "The new class is ready for graduation," Danny said. 12 different species, all learning to make bread for their home worlds." Rebecca walked to the baking school, housed in what had once been an empty Vorthak military facility. Now it was filled with ovens, workstations, and students from across the galaxy. She watched a Zentari carefully shaping dough next to a Mtai who was learning rice bread techniques. A group of Kuloth were working together on a complex grain mixture that their species could digest. "Before we graduate this class," Rebecca announced to the assembled students, "I want you to remember something important. You are not just learning to make bread. You are learning to save lives." She held up a simple loaf, golden brown and perfectly shaped. "This is not just food. This is hope. This is survival. This is proof that sometimes the most complex problems have the simplest solutions." The graduation ceremony took place in the Great Hall of Karolith City. Representatives from dozens of species attended, along with the entire Vorthak population. Rebecca watched as each student received their certification and a starter culture to take back to their home worlds. That evening, there was a celebration feast. Long tables were filled with dozens of different types of bread, each representing a different world and culture. The Vorthak had prepared their traditional honey bread, while visiting species contributed their own variations. Commander Thane stood to address the crowd. 6 months ago, we were a dying people. Our pride had blinded us to simple solutions. We thought strength meant eating only meat, that warriors could not lower themselves to plant foods." He looked at Rebecca, sitting at the place of honor beside him. "Dr. Rebecca Martinez, our pack sister, taught us that true strength comes from wisdom, that sometimes survival requires changing everything you believe about yourself." He raised a piece of bread in toast. "To bread, which saved our bodies. to Rebecca, who saved our souls, and to the future, which will be built on the foundation of simple kindness and shared knowledge. The entire hall erupted in cheers, howls, and various alien sounds of approval. Later that night, Rebecca stood again on her balcony, looking out over the lights of Caroleth City. But now she could also see lights from the agricultural areas, the baking schools, and the research facilities. Lisa Park joined her, having also chosen to stay and work security for the Research Institute. "Any second thoughts?" Lisa asked. Rebecca thought about her old life, traveling from world to world as a simple researcher. Then she thought about the messages she received daily from grateful species across the galaxy. She thought about the cubs playing in wheat fields and the former warriors who now took pride in perfect loaves of bread. "None," Rebecca said. "This is what I was meant to do." In the distance, she could see Vorthak ships preparing for departure. They were carrying seeds, knowledge, and hope to other worlds. Some carried Vorthak bakers who would teach bread-making to new species. Others carried simple gifts of grain to worlds facing starvation. The proud warrior species had become something new. They were still strong, still brave, but now they were also healers and teachers. They had learned that sometimes the greatest victory came not from conquest, but from sharing. Rebecca smiled as the smell of tomorrow's bread drifted on the night air. Somewhere in the galaxy, another species was facing extinction. Another civilization was dying from pride or starvation or simple ignorance. But now there was hope. Now there were teachers willing to share the simplest and most powerful gift in the universe, the gift of bread, and the human willingness to offer it freely to any who were hungry. As Rebecca fell asleep that night, she dreamed of golden fields under alien suns, of cubs growing strong on simple food, and of a galaxy where no species would ever again have to face extinction alone. The pack had been dying. One human had changed everything with bread, and the universe would never be the same.